Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Valerie Castro in for Savannah Sellers. Breaking news right now on Morning News Now. Moscow under fire. A rare attack on Russia's capital city. This morning, Russian officials are blaming Ukraine for a wave of overnight drone strikes. The first such attack on Moscow's residential areas since Russia invaded Ukraine. All this after several days of Russian airstrikes on Kyiv. We have team coverage with those newest developments this morning and how it could mark a turning point in the war. Also this morning, rescued from the rubble, an incredible story of survival in Iowa. One woman has been found alive inside that partially collapsed apartment building in downtown Davenport. Now there are new calls to keep demolition crews from tearing the rest of it down. We'll take you to the scene for the latest. Final push. This morning, the race is on to raise the debt ceiling, with the House committee set to vote on a tentative deal later today.
Look, you know I never say I'm confident what the Congress is going to do, but I feel very good about it. I'm confident that we'll get a vote in both houses, and we'll see.
But some lawmakers say they're going to vote against the agreement as the threat of a potentially catastrophic default grows. And chill out. A new trend on TikTok is helping people keep their cool literally. People using ice packs as a form of stress relief. But does it actually work? We'll get a professional to weigh in. A lot to get to this morning.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about the ice pack thing, like if I injure my shoulder, perhaps,
right.
But we'll see if it works for stress.
I guess we'll find out more, right? Well, we start with breaking news this morning. Drone attacks on targets inside Russia, a sign that the war in Ukraine is heating up.
This morning, drones attacked buildings in the heart of Moscow. This was the first attack on residential buildings in the capital since the war started. But Ukraine officials say they had nothing to do with the attack. This follows a series of rare daytime airstrikes against Kyiv, including another deadly attack overnight. According to reports out of Ukraine, at least one person has been killed in those attacks. Let's bring in NBC News foreign correspondent Megan Fitzgerald, who's following the latest developments from London, along with NBC News analyst Colonel Jack Jacobs. Megan, let's start with you. What's the latest we know about this attack, both in Moscow and also these ongoing airstrikes on Kyiv?
Well, Joe, good to be with you. We'll start in Moscow, where we know that some 8 drones were launched in the capital city of Moscow. And we know that several buildings received some damage. We know 2 people received some medical treatment. They were not hospitalized. There were no deaths associated with this. We understand that President Putin was briefed about this incident early this morning, and that they're saying that their air defense mechanisms that they have in place are working. They are calling this a terror attack. They are blaming Kyiv. Kyiv, of course, has not taken responsibility for this. But look, let's talk about Kyiv, because they have seen their 3rd attack on the capital city there in Ukraine in just the last 24 hours. And so what we saw early this morning is another barrage of these drones. There's some 31 drones that were launched, the majority of them targeted towards Kyiv. We know that several people were injured. We know that one person died. We're talking apartment buildings, houses, cars, shops, stores, all damaged in these attacks. And then, of course, we just have to back up a couple of days to Saturday, when we saw the largest barrage of drone attacks in Kyiv since the war began. That, of course, one day before the city celebrated their founding day on Sunday. And then, of course, yesterday we saw a very rare incident of those in the middle of the day attack. We saw some missiles being launched at around 11 o'clock in the morning. Of course, we are seeing tensions continuing to rise with the drone attacks that we're seeing. Of course, Kyiv, again, not taking responsibility for that. But then, of course, the escalating violence that we're seeing in Kyiv, all of this as we know that Ukraine is preparing for this highly anticipated counteroffensive that we understand is getting ready to launch. Of course, no date has been set, but certainly all eyes are going to be on that. As we just saw 2 weeks ago, President Zelensky on his European tour asking for those weapons ahead of this counteroffensive. And that was largely a successful trip, getting the majority of what he asked for.
So, Colonel
Joe?
Jacobs, it's not clear who's behind the drone attacks on Moscow. As we've said, Ukraine is denying any involvement. But an attack like this on Moscow, it has huge significance, right?
Yeah, it does. Anytime you're going to take the war to Moscow, it's certainly an indication that Ukraine, or people who are supporting Ukraine, even those inside Russia, are quite serious about trying to negate Russia's capability to defend itself, or at least demonstrate that Putin and the Kremlin and the Russian war machine are not invulnerable, despite the fact that the Russians claim, probably correctly, that all or most of the drones were intercepted in flight. But it's a relatively small number of drones. And there's no indication that if a large number of drones was launched against Russia, that the Russian air defenses would be able to cope with it. It certainly is raising tensions. And unless and until Ukraine says that they were behind it all, there'll always be speculation that it was a Russian homegrown attack, which is not beyond the realm of possibility, Joe.
So, Colonel Jacobs, I want to ask you, Ukraine has taken some major hits recently. Still, they have managed to fire back, make their presence known to Russia. Could this be the beginning of Ukraine trying to get some sort of upper hand, starting this counteroffensive we've been talking about?
A lot of people, and probably correctly, believe that the attacks on Russian soil are a sideshow. And the real exercise is going to be down in the Donbass, that the Ukrainians probably less interested in doing anything more than harassing Russia, because they want to keep their powder dry, save their attack capabilities for the counteroffensive that'll take place in the southeast. And these are just harassing attacks, even if Ukraine is directly behind it. So they're husbanding their ammunition. Don't forget that any kind of counteroffensive is going to include a very large number of direct and indirect fire weapons like drones. So it's important that Ukraine keep as many drones as possible for its counteroffensive.
All right, Megan Fitzgerald and Colonel Jacobs, thank you both for kicking us off this hour. We appreciate it.
In Washington today, lawmakers will start the first step in the process of approving the debt ceiling deal in hopes of avoiding that June 5th default deadline. The House Rules Committee will take up the deal reached by the White House and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, and it's shaping up to be a heated session. There are still holdouts on both sides of the aisle, and there's no guarantee this deal will go through. But if it did, the bill would suspend the debt ceiling until early 2025 and tighten federal funding. President Biden says this deal would avoid a, quote, catastrophic default by the federal government while keeping the economy fluid. But Biden and McCarthy still have their work cut out for them. They need to shore up enough votes in both the House and the Senate, and doing it all quickly, at least by Washington standards. We have NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale and White House correspondent Mike Memoli with us this morning. Good morning to you both. Ali, let's start with you. House leaders are trying to shore up support, but there are still several Republicans who just aren't on board. Talk about what their concerns are and where things stand this morning.
Look, some of these Republicans were never going to be on board with this deal. One of them, for example, is Texas Republican Chip Roy, who I spoke to even before the weekend negotiations actually bore fruit on a deal. And Roy was already saying that he didn't like the contours of what he was hearing. Certainly that hasn't changed now that the deal itself is in a more final form and now being sold to members. But Roy is one of those people who I even asked him at the time, were you ever going to vote for anything that was bipartisanly negotiated? He didn't answer either way, but he is someone who we were always skeptical of because of the hyper-conservative position that he has long held within his party. And with Roy come many others within the ultra-conservative House Freedom Caucus. Here, for example, is the way that Roy was talking about it over the weekend. Watch.
We are barreling towards unlimited debt in this country. We're just barreling towards an infinite amount of debt. And we've got to stop that.
This thing will absolutely pass. There's no question about that. I've talked to dozens of members, and listen, not every single member is on board, but when was the last time that every single member of Congress agreed on anything?
Dusty Johnson saying the quiet part out loud here about the other members of his conference. When was the last time everyone was on board? McCarthy doesn't need everyone, but he does need a sizable chunk of his conference, and that's what he's working on doing right now.
And Mike, on the Democrat side, President Biden has been making a final push for support over the last few days. But Michigan Congresswoman Debbie Dingell told MSNBC's Chris Jansen yesterday this bill contains things she would never vote for. Let's listen to what she had to say about it.
I've been angry for days for many reasons that we are being held hostage. We cannot default on our loan, our debts, and I know that. Yet at the same time, we cannot be rubber stamps.
Okay, Mike, so what is President Biden saying to Democrats like her who are on the fence over whether they'll support this deal?
Well, what the White House is really saying is that this is the reality of divided government. This is not what we saw in the first 2 years of the Biden administration, which was largely Democrats negotiating with other Democrats to try to get the president's agenda through. Now you have to accept some things that you would consider unpalatable because Republicans do have control of the House. That being said, the president's argument is also going to be it could have been far worse. You look at a side-by-side of what the House Republicans passed just a few weeks ago versus what this compromise looks like, and it results in things like a 2-year budget agreement versus one that you would have to revisit next year in an election year. It includes the fact that non-defense spending, so the entire domestic spending budget is, as the White House is calling it, roughly flat. Republicans would have imposed some steep cuts to domestic programs. The hardest pill for Democrats to swallow are changes to essentially anti-poverty programs like food stamps. And what the White House is also saying there is that this is temporary changes, and that while the eligibility was restricted for some individuals, they also expanded it for others, including veterans and the homeless. And so this is a significant compromise that Democrats think that at least the White House is selling that they can live with. It reminds me of Joe Biden's political axiom, which is don't judge me against the almighty, judge me against the alternative. And this is the legislative equivalent of that.
Allie, of course, the focus in Congress has been getting this through the House. But if that happens, it, of course, still has to pass the Senate. Could that be just as difficult?
Yes, that funny thing called the Senate. I mean, we've managed to avoid it over the course of the last few weeks because most of the action has been on the House side and, frankly, on the House Republican side. That's because Minority Leader Mitch McConnell really farmed out the negotiating portion of this to Speaker McCarthy because of the realities within the House Republican conference. Those realities are still there, and we're going to spend the first part of this week working through the House Republican side of this. But then as soon as it passes the House, and I'm saying as soon as because it's expected to, though we don't know exactly how that's going to happen yet. Once it does that, then it moves over to the Senate side of this. And look, again, the Senate can decide either all 100 of them want to do this quickly or they can bog this down. We've already seen some key conservative senators saying they're not happy with this deal in the same way that House Freedom Caucus members are not. And they're willing to gum this process up and try to make it move as slowly as possible. Watching the votes come together on that side is going to be interesting, too, just because of the way McConnell is usually able to leverage the members of his caucus as opposed to the more unruly way that the House tends to go. But look, never say never. This could still be interesting down to the last moment that we're in there. But they are still stretching for that June 5th deadline, and that's going to be the thing to watch, too.
We will all be watching. Allie and Mike, thanks so much.
Now to a pretty incredible story of survival at that partially collapsed apartment building in Davenport, Iowa. A woman trapped inside for 24 hours suddenly waved out of a window hours after first responders had called off their search. The city had planned to start demolition on the 116-year-old building as soon as today, but residents are now demanding a delay. NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa has more.
Hey, Joe, good morning from downtown Davenport. Amid this jaw-dropping wreckage last night, an incredible story of survival and of hope. 52-year-old Lisa Brooks, one of the people who family had said was missing amid this wreckage the entire time, last night waving from her window in that building. People on the ground started cheering and clapping, realizing she was still in there, she was still alive. Her family was here on the ground as that happened. Brooks, who her family says is disabled, basically telling her relatives later on that she had been largely in shock, hiding under her couch for most of the past 24 hours since that huge chunk of her 6-story historic apartment building collapsed on Sunday. Again, as we said, immediately people were cheering and clapping, but also pretty quickly they became angry, arguing that this is proof that there could be more survivors amid that rubble and demanding the city of Davenport postpone plans to basically demolish what's left of this building as soon as tomorrow. In light of this, the mayor overnight telling me those plans to demolish are now, quote, under evaluation. With the official cause of this wreckage still basically unknown, it's coming to light, officials confirming that residents have been complaining about the condition of this building for years, citing things like major cracks in their walls and foundation and recently falling bricks while kind of facade work was going on the front of this building. The owner, to that point, had recently, records show, taken out permits to kind of begin this improvement work. Obviously, people here arguing that this is proof that work wasn't done fast enough. NBC has reached out to the owner multiple times. We have yet to hear back at this point. Now the big question on the ground is what will happen today? Will those demolition plans go forward this morning as expected? Again, as the city said they would yesterday. Officials had argued at the time that they had gone through this wreckage site thoroughly, including with search and rescue canines. They had said the search and rescue portion of this was finished, and they said we're ready indeed to demolish it. Obviously, those plans now, to say the least, up in the air. In the meantime, officials also warning people that this is obviously an unstable structure. They fear the rest of it could come down at any time, and they are begging people, including protesters, to stay as far back from this site, at least blocks, they say, as possible. Joe, I'll send it back to you.
All right, Maggie Vespa, thank you.
Now to a series of Memorial Day weekend shootings and violence that are casting a dark shadow over a day of remembrance. The latest happening in Hollywood, Florida last night. So far, at least 9 are injured, and at least 3 of them are children. This is part of a nationwide trend of occurrences just yesterday. I took a look at some of the several cities grappling with the aftermath of yet another encounter with gun violence. Gun violence and bloodshed, a stain on the unofficial start to summer. At least 16 people killed in shootings across the country this Memorial Day weekend, including 3 at a motorcycle rally in Red River, New Mexico. 5 others injured when police say the event turned into a shootout between rival biker gangs.
All 8 individuals have been identified as outlaw motorcycle gangmen.
30-year-old Jacob David Castillo charged with an open count of murder, according to state police. In Massachusetts, chaos Sunday night. 2 shootings on Revere Beach just an hour apart. Boston police attributing the violence to 2 massive fights that escalated.
And all of a sudden there were 3 shots and a bunch of guys started running. And then some cops running, chasing them. And then all hell broke loose after that.
Ohio and Wisconsin not spared by the violence. Columbus police say 7 were injured after a shooting during a party in the southeast area of the city. 3 killed and 9 injured in weekend shootings across Milwaukee, according to police. Mass shootings across the country, defined by the Gun Violence Archive as 4 or more people injured or killed, reaching 257 incidents so far, just 150 days into the year. In Chicago, newly elected Mayor Brandon Johnson, hoping to get in front of any issues, announced public safety measures ahead of the weekend.
Our public safety agencies have plans in place for the weekend and summer months to ensure that everyone can enjoy our city in peace.
But just 1 day later, Telemundo's Chicago cameras capturing shots fired between beachgoers at the city's North Avenue beach on opening day.
We looked up and we couldn't even grab all of our stuff before we went and hid behind the lifeguard stand. When it happened in the first minute, it was definitely just like adrenaline, like instinct run away, and it was scary.
North Avenue Beach is now closed. I need everybody to exit the sand and the water.
Chicago police say at least 37 people were injured across the city and 8 killed, including 35-year-old William Hare.
He was my older brother and also my best friend. He was caring about everybody he met. Very friendly, very talkative, and a great listener.
Investigators say Hare was found shot in the chest on the sidewalk in the Lakeview neighborhood.
Their car pulled up, 2 people came out. There were 2 gunshots, 1 from each person. They did not ask for money, they did not ask for anything. They shot at him for no reason. 1 bullet struck him in the chest, and his best friend tried to save his life, and he died.
The holiday meant as a time to reflect on those who served, now forever marked as a time of tragedy for some families. And the numbers are still on the rise in places like Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Houston. According to the Gun Violence Archive, as of this morning, there have been more than 17,000 gun violence deaths in the U.S. this year alone. We'll have more updates on that Hollywood, Florida shooting later on Morning News Now.
Disgraced Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes is heading to prison today. She's set to surrender in Texas to start serving her 11-year sentence. Last year, Holmes was convicted of fraud for lying to investors. She exaggerated her company's blood testing technology and its financial health. Earlier this month, a federal judge ordered her to pay nearly $500 million to the victims of her crimes.
Now let's take a look at some rainy weather that could be heading your way.
Meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us with the latest on your morning news now forecast. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning to you both. And yeah, some of us will see some rain today. The Northeast, the Great Lakes, still looking at gorgeous weather. We had a beautiful Memorial Day yesterday. We're going to continue that today. But some spots are seeing some rain because we have a couple fronts that are moving throughout the country. The first one being in the middle of the country. We have a cold front that sort of draped across the area. It's going to bring rounds of showers and storms. Could bring some pretty heavy rainfall as well. We'll get into that. Also throughout the Great Basin, portions of the Southeast could see some showers, and also just the southern portions of the Mid-Atlantic. We'll see those lingering showers from that coastal low that is finally moving over the Atlantic. So that will start to improve as we go throughout the day. But let's start with that front in the middle of the country because it's sort of a rinse and repeat forecast. We're going to see it today. We're going to see it tomorrow, sort of staying in place and bringing those showers over and over again. So strong storms are likely from New Mexico to Minnesota. We could see some really gusty winds, some hail, the chance of a tornado or two, although that risk is on the lower side. But we're worried about isolated flash flooding because we could see up to 3, even 5 inches of rain with those really heavy downpours. Then tomorrow, the pattern's going to stay active, and we're going to see that severe risk now targeting Colorado to the Texas Panhandle. So pretty much the same areas, not moving very far as we go throughout the next 24 hours. And you can see on this future radar, we're looking at some really gusty storms and also some heavy rain tomorrow. This is what it looks like this afternoon and evening. We sort of need that daytime heat to get things started. So we're looking anywhere from North Platte down to Lamar, even just west of Dodge City. Where you see the yellow, that is the likeliest spot for seeing some storms. Winds gusting up to 80 miles per hour. That's hurricane force winds. Damaging hail, the chance of a few tornadoes as well. And again, we're concerned about those really gusty winds. So where you see that hatched areas, those blue lines, that's where we're expecting the likelihood for some really gusty winds. I mentioned the rainfall anywhere from 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch, but isolated amounts of 3 to 5 inches. It's really hard to pinpoint where we could see these downpours, but where you see those brighter colors, those are the likeliest spots of seeing the heaviest downpours. And flash flood risk, that's not only in the central and southern plains, we're also looking in portions of the Great Basin as well. So we're looking at Billings to Boise, and also Reno could see some flash flooding today.
Today, the trial of the man accused of the biggest anti-Semitic attack in American history begins.
The alleged mass shooter, Robert Bauer, is accused of targeting and killing 11 Jewish worshipers at a Pittsburgh synagogue in 2018. He faces 63 counts, including hate crime charges.
Joining us now from outside the courthouse in Pittsburgh is NBC News correspondent George Solis. George, good morning. Tell us, what can we expect in the courtroom today?
Hey, good morning, Valerie and Joe. We can expect an emotional start to this trial. It's been 4.5 years since this massacre took place. We're expecting to see witnesses from the on the prosecution side to testify in this case. It took a while to get this case going. The jury selection alone took about a month. And right now, as you mentioned, 63 charges that Robert Bauer faces. 22 of those are punishable by death. He has pled not guilty. There's been a lot of back and forth between the prosecution and the defense hoping that a deal could have been reached before this ever got to trial to basically give him life in prison, because this case centers basically in 2 phases. First on the guilt, following by the sentencing. And there is a lot of debate on whether or not Robert Bauer should get the death penalty. So again, if he is convicted during this first part of the phase, then the trial will move towards the sentencing. Overall, though, we are expecting prosecutors to present witnesses for this case. The defense, though, at this point is unclear if they will bring anyone up to the stand today, guys.
So, George, I mean, it took about a month already to sit this jury. What was that process like?
Yeah, the jury is made up of 12 jurors, 7 men and 11 women. It took a while because, again, in this case, there's so much controversy surrounding the death penalty. We understand that about 1,500 questionnaires were sent out to try and find an impartial jury, people that didn't feel strongly one way or another about this capital punishment. So it definitely took a while, but eventually the process was sorted out, and now we have this juror of 12 and 6 alternates. Overall, though, we are expecting, like I said, a pretty emotional day here. Day one of this trial expected to start sometime around 9. Joe and Valerie?
George, you touched on the emotion there. How is this trial and the reminder of the mass shooting impacting the community there?
Yeah, obviously, this pulls on a lot of heartstrings. A lot of people going to the synagogue there to pay their respects throughout this period of time of mourning, and to have to relive this today for many of the families, obviously, is a very daunting task. Many of them who we expect to be in the courthouse today. And again, some divisiveness here as well. Some congregants don't believe that Robert Bowers should get the death penalty. Others say the punishment fits the crime. So again, how this all shakes out over the course of the next 2 months as this trial is expected to take place is anyone's guess, guys.
Okay, George, outside the courthouse there in Pittsburgh, George Solis, thanks so much.
Let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalas with a look at what could happen inside the courtroom. So, Danny, tell us about the charges. 63 in all. 13 are hate crime charges. What do prosecutors need to do to prove that?
Yes, and as we heard, several of those are the ones that make this death penalty eligible. That's why you had such a long jury selection process. But here, the government's burden isn't going to be as difficult as it would be in other cases in which you have a whodunit. There doesn't appear to be much of a whodunit here, but with all of these different crimes, many of them have overlapping elements. You have the use of a firearm. You're going to see introduction of evidence of his hate, his intent, the fact that he had negative feelings towards other people, specifically Jewish people. So you're going to see all that introduced in order to prove the hate crimes. Then they're going to prove the use of the firearm. There doesn't seem to be much dispute there. The police responded to the scene. There were statements that he made to the police at the scene. So the government's burden, while it is beyond a reasonable doubt, they have a lot of evidence here. This is not a mystery. The government is going to be able to prove this case, which is probably why the defense from the beginning expressed their willingness to make this a non-trial resolution, a plea deal, which the government apparently is just not interested in.
Danny, to get to this point, a jury had to be selected and seated. How difficult would that have been in this community where this tragedy happened? It's
hard enough to seat a jury in a high-profile case. It is harder if the case involves the killing of innocents, and harder still if it is a federal death penalty eligible case, because you not only have to seat jurors in a high-profile case, a controversial case, but you also have to ask the additional questions that make them death penalty eligible. And that is really difficult because you have to ask questions like, could you vote to send somebody to their death? And when you think about it, all of us, no matter what your religion is, have been trained since birth almost about the sanctity of human life, to not harm others. So that goes against our thinking. When you think about it, it goes against our training to say, hey, I could vote to send someone to their death, a stranger, somebody else, irrespective of the reason. So that's why it's so difficult to get a death penalty jury. It's the only jury normally in the federal system. The judge decides the punishment. In a death penalty case, that's a reversal of the rule. The jury decides guilt. And they also decide the punishment, death penalty yes or death penalty no.
Bowers' lawyers filed a motion to try and get the death penalty off the table. What is their strategy here?
You got to try everything you can in a case like this. Sometimes you're just handed a very difficult case as a defense attorney, and that's the situation here. You try anything you can, and the argument here is, hey, there were other cases in which the federal government did not seek a death penalty. They were just as bad. Therefore, the government's choice to seek the death penalty here is arbitrary, and the death penalty cannot be meted out arbitrarily. Now, the judge denied it. It was an interesting motion, not likely to succeed. But again, when you have this set of bad facts against your client, you have to try anything you can. And remember, these are court-appointed counsel. These are people who are doing their duty. I'm a defense attorney, so I feel strongly for these folks. They are doing their duty. They're assigned to this case. They didn't choose this client. So they are doing what everybody, it's not a popular job, but it's something that our Constitution absolutely enshrines. So it's really important stuff.
All right, Danny Savalas, appreciate you being here to break it down. Thank you so much.
International headlines now. Italian firefighters have recovered 4 bodies from an Italian lake after a tourist boat overturned over the weekend.
NBC's Claudio Lavanga joins us from Rome with that and other world headlines. Claudio, good morning.
Good morning. Well, on Sunday, more than 20 people were celebrating a birthday on board of a tourist boat on Lake Maggiore in the north of Italy when they're caught up in a sudden storm and their boat capsized. Now, most passengers managed to swim ashore or were rescued by other boats, but 4 of them, as you mentioned, died. On Monday, it was revealed that 2 of the victims were Italian intelligence agents and 1 was a retired member of the Israeli security forces. The 4th victim was the wife of the boat's owner. Let's go to Uganda, where the president approved a new anti-homosexuality legislation. Homosexuality was already illegal in Uganda, but the new law now imposes the death penalty for those who have sex with someone below the age of 18 or is infected with HIV. The United Nations and the US warned that this new crackdown will put the country's progress in tackling HIV in grave jeopardy, as people will be even more discouraged from seeking help for fear of punishment. And let's end this short tour of the world in China, where a university professor became the first civilian astronaut to be sent to space. He was part of a crew of 3 astronauts who took off this morning on board of a rocket that will take them to China's Tiangong space station orbiting the Earth. The choice of the university professor generated interest in China not only because he's the first civilian astronaut, but also because he wears eyeglasses. And many on social media wondered how someone without perfect vision could be physically cleared for a space mission. Well, it's a bit of a space oddity, guys.
I definitely would not have made it then if that was I'm totally blind.
Maybe it's a fashion statement.
Claudio, thank you so much. We're back now with our weekly mental health check-in. More men are experiencing symptoms of depression just weeks after their babies are born. We'll tell you how to spot those symptoms.
Plus, ever wonder what makes the body stressed? We have more on what some call the stress hormone. Let's bring in Dr. George James for more on this. He is a licensed marriage and family therapist. Doctor, good to have you with us. So let's start with postnatal depression in men. New research found up to 10% of men experience some sort of depression once their child's born. So walk us through why that is, what the symptoms are that some men are experiencing, and how they can be treated.
Yes, postnatal depression is something that we've heard that many women go through, but actually many men, many fathers go through it as well. And some of the symptoms are, sometimes feeling sad or detached or disconnected, feeling torn or guilty, or having to go back to work or not being able to support their child as much. And overall, that these men are going through so many different things. As you see, they could be experiencing some weight loss, they could be dealing with some sleep troubles. And part of it is they feel sometimes they can't talk about what they're going through because their partner or mother is the high priority. So they do need some focus and attention as well.
And Doctor, we talk a lot about stress in this series, so we want to take a look at what's going on inside the body when we are feeling stress. That starts with a hormone called cortisol. What does cortisol do to the body, and can we regulate it so we can better handle those stressful situations?
Yes, cortisol is one of those hormones in our body that is actually very helpful. It comes out during our fight or flight moments where we're in those stressful moments where we feel like we need to do something. It's actually pretty healthy and needed. But when we experience high levels of stress or ongoing stress or trauma, cortisol is constantly going, and that's where it can be very difficult and cause other situations for people. So to regulate it is you have to regulate how you respond to stressful situations. Have some go-to moves, get some support, talk to somebody to help you so that the cortisol is not at high levels all the time.
Let's talk a little bit about diet here. You're supposed to eat your greens, but if you're struggling to do that, hey, here's a study that might convince you to buckle down. Researchers in the UK and Australia found eating more vegetables could help lower depression and leave you feeling, this is interesting, more relaxed. So why is that?
Now, this is one of those studies that we're like, yes, of course. We've been hearing this for many years, right? Eating a healthier diet, eating more greens, it's just healthy all around for your body and for your emotions. And some of that is also when we eat non-healthy things, it actually can increase our levels of stress and anxiety. We're eating more sweets and other things like that. So just eating more greens can allow us to be in a more peaceful place. It can help us to be in a more mindful state. And most likely, those individuals are also still staying a little bit more active on average than maybe others, which also can help to lower your anxiety. So it's a good thing all around. Eat your greens. It will help you in the long run.
And finally, Dr. James, we have to turn to TikTok for this next trend. Users are putting ice packs on their faces for 15 minutes to help relieve symptoms of anxiety. Is this something we should all be doing?
I don't think that we all should be doing this, but there is something that is there, right? For a lot of folks, when we're anxious, we are not in our kind of present mind. We're sometimes in the future. Sometimes something that's a little bit cooler or a little bit warmer can bring us into the present moment and allow us to just relax. But we also need to practice other things. We need to think about, why are we anxious? We need to find ways to push through or fight through that anxiety. And then we also need to practice things like exercise or other things that can help us to regulate the anxiety and to manage it. So these things can be helpful, but I would actually want someone to seek out a medical provider and practice finding those things, breathing, exercise, maybe a little cool or warm, to be in the moment and practice mindfulness so that you can overcome the anxiety in that moment.
So a polar bear plunge alone won't cure your problems. You need a few other tools. All right, Dr. George James, as always, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
We have a new warning this morning for parents of newborns. An NBC News investigation on infant loungers found that there were more deaths caused by these baby products than the numbers initially reported by the government. NBC News senior consumer investigative correspondent Vicki Wynn has more on what every parent needs to know.
It was a very special time for our family.
Kate and Brandon Movitz welcomed baby Pierce into their family in May of 2020.
He was just a little dream for us.
Yeah, the first time I held him, I just gushed at him and felt the unconditional love.
They didn't think twice about putting him to sleep in an infant lounger, a cushion pad or pillow for babies. Their 5-year-old son, Jude, slept in the same one when he was a newborn.
Everyone used them because they work. They help babies sleep.
When Pierce was 10 weeks old, he went to sleep in his DockATot Deluxe Plus baby lounger. He didn't wake up. The autopsy revealed Pierce died accidentally from positional asphyxia.
After Pierce passed, I looked up the product and it said, not for infant sleep, which we didn't know.
2 years ago, after reports of 8 infant deaths, the Consumer Product Safety Commission recalled more than 3 million boppy newborn loungers. But an NBC News analysis found at least 26 baby deaths linked to various brands of infant loungers between 2015 and 2023. More than twice as many deaths cited by the CPSC in its recent warnings.
Had we known, we would have never put him in it.
NBC News asked DockATot about Pierce Movitz's death and others. The company says it is committed to safety, adding none of the reports have shown its products were the cause of those tragedies. Alex Hohen-Sarek is the CPSC chair.
There was some criticism that when CPSC initially reported the potential dangers, that you knew of more deaths than you made the public aware of. How do you respond to that?
So we have laws that restrict us, our ability to talk to the public about all the information we know about products. So if I knew about a danger about a product right now, I couldn't go and tell you about it without actually first going to the company itself and letting them know what we're going to say.
That seems backwards.
I agree.
He says restrictions on issuing recalls and warnings about products delay how quickly the CPSC can get safety information to the public. Industry representatives say infant loungers come with warnings and are safe if used as intended on the floor for babies who are awake and closely monitored.
Should these products be taken off the market? Yes or no?
So I can say this. I would never buy these products for myself or my family. I think it's dangerous.
If someone has this in their home right now, what should they do with it?
If it was me, I would take that product and I would get rid of it.
The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends babies sleep alone on their backs on a firm, flat mattress in a crib or bassinet with no loose blankets, pillows, crib bumpers, or other soft items.
We were all together as a family in the back.
The Movitzes started the Pierced Forever Foundation to help other families who've lost babies.
If there's even an ounce of chance that these infant loungers can cause death or injuries, then people should know about it.
They hope sharing their story will help protect other babies.
If we can help other families learn so they don't have to go through the nightmare we've lived through, that would be incredible. And an honor to Pierce.
Vicki Wynn, NBC News, Detroit.
Welcome back. Concerns are growing over a decision by some electric car companies to pull AM radio from some models. Those companies say AM radio frequencies are messing with their electric models, but the decision is creating new fears that people could be at risk in emergencies because they'll miss life-saving radio alerts. The debate is raising new questions about how we'll all access critical info as technology keeps evolving. NBC's Katie Beck has the story.
You see it in the movies and in video games.
This is an emergency broadcast transmission.
To bring you this important bulletin.
If you are hearing this broadcast, seek shelter immediately.
Emergency warnings mainly transmitting on AM radio stations. The alert saving countless lives in real life, too.
This is a Clear Channel emergency response team.
This is your signal. This is your distress signal out there. We'll continue to try to help you find your loved ones.
You are going into an area that you know exactly what is happening.
Telling people what they need to know and do during emergencies. Road signs like this one directing people where to tune in during a disaster.
That's the story right now as the Coast Guard comes in.
Like KSCO, an AM radio station in Santa Cruz, California, which has been around since 1947.
Get up and go, it's today you know on KSCO Radio.
And reaches millions across Central California.
The radio station has always been here first to serve the community, and it's a community that needs a lot of service in times of storms and earthquakes and floods and power outages and any other kind of unusual local disaster that you can think about.
Now those alerts are getting harder for people to actually hear. Why? Because electric vehicles are becoming more popular around the country. Sales were up 65% last year, and the car companies that make them are ditching AM radios in their new models. Automakers say it's because the motors on electric cars interfere with AM frequencies. The automakers say the alerts should keep up with the changing tech, saying people should use phones instead of radios in emergencies. But officials say that presents a clear challenge.
The fact of the matter is broadcast radio and television are free mediums to push emergency information to people.
While AM radio is on the decline, 47 million people still listen to it, according to Nielsen, including those who may not have the money to buy things like smartphones or satellite radio. And this has Josh Gottheimer of New Jersey and Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts calling automakers out.
How are people supposed to get this information on their phone when they're driving through a climate-induced catastrophic storm?
What do you do when there's a power outage, or when there's an earthquake, or when there's a fire? The internet, 99 out of 100 times during a disaster, ain't there. It just doesn't work. But radio is there.
Lawmakers and radio hosts on the same wavelength about why AM radio is so important to so many across the U.S. Katie Beck, NBC News.
Some more financial headlines now. A popular Android screen recording app has been accused of secretly spying on its users.
CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that and other money news. Silvana, good morning.
Joe, Valerie, good morning. Yeah, so listen to this. A cybersecurity firm says a popular Android screen recording app has spied on its users, stealing microphone recordings and other documents from phones. The firm found the app called iRecorder Screen Recorder introduced malicious code as an app update almost a year after it was listed in the Google Play Store. Now, the code allowed it to upload a minute of audio from a device's microphone every 15 minutes and access documents, web pages, and media files. Now, the app is no longer listed in Google Play, but users are being advised to delete it. iRecorder had racked up more than 50,000 downloads. Kohl's is the latest company to receive backlash from conservatives for support of the LGBTQ+ community. Forbes reports the retailer is in focus from the right over a Pride Month display that included children's clothing and a number of Disney-themed items. Kohl's annual ESG report shows the company is clearly supportive of LGBTQ+ causes. Now, it's unclear whether that's what has drawn the ire of conservatives, as Kohl's has participated in Pride Month since at least 2017. Apple, Fox, and Netflix have emerged as potential bidders for future NBA media rights, with the price tag expected to top $5 billion a year. Now, currently, Disney, that's the parent of ABC and ESPN, and Warner Brothers Discovery, that's the parent of TNT, are in an exclusive negotiating window to renew their contracts with the league, which expire in 2025. And Bloomberg reports some tech giants have expressed interest in bidding once that window ends next spring. The NBA is expected to sell the rights to more than 2 companies and may carve out a games for streaming service, guys.
I bet interest is high in Miami this morning for anything related to the NBA. So, all right.
Silvana, thank you so much.
Most parents have been known to show off their kids' accomplishments on social media, and not even incredibly famous parents like Beyonce can avoid it. The Cuffit singer shared the sweetest Instagram post with this video of Blue Ivy killing it on stage during her Renaissance World Tour. Blue Ivy was wearing almost the exact same outfit as her mom. You can see she was flawlessly dancing along with the rest of the backup dancers. Beyonce captioned the post writing, "I'm so proud to be your mama. You bring us so much joy, my sweet angel." A reminder, Blue Ivy, just 11 years old. And this made me realize we have so many more generations of Beyonce-ness ahead of us, which makes me very happy.
And looking forward to that. And who else is she going to learn to dance from better than Beyonce?
No kidding,
right?
yeah, the queen.
Finally, this hour, we're almost at the end of AAPI month, and the celebration continues. Today, we're looking at a Disney Plus show that has everyone talking. MSNBC's Richard Louie got to chat with the cast of American-Born Chinese about the show's major impact both within the community and beyond.
A mashup, fantasy and teen turmoil, angst, martial arts, drama and comedy. A game changer.
So freaking unbelievable.
The lead in the series American-Born Chinese, a high schooler.
I just want to be a regular guy who does regular stuff.
To some, actor Ben Wong is unexpected, like his character's ponderings of race and the metaverse.
He's a new student and he's Chinese, like you.
I'm not from this world.
It is a spectacular stew, you could say, of everything, everywhere, all at once. It does include Oscar winner Michelle Yeoh.
These are important stories to be told about people who look like us.
Audiences, I feel like right now, are ready for it. You know, especially young audiences, they're more sophisticated now, like me.
And like President Biden.
We see the possibilities of the community and all the young people here.
He hosted the show at the White House, the largest Asian American gathering there ever.
We grew up watching and understanding media from all sorts of different places, watching anime, right? Watching things with subtitles, which used to be a thing, right?
You know, I think I do remember you. I mean, you kind of stand out, obviously.
There's also a bit of rom-com. Sydney Taylor plays the love interest.
I wanted them to have a good friendship.
Maybe not.
And we didn't know, actually, how it would end.
No, we got script to script, so...
Right. So as we were shooting the episode...
keep it open.
We'd find out what happens next.
Open like the story of this phantasmagorical feast. The son of a god, a goddess, and a 90s sitcom caricature of Asian racial tropes.
What could go wrong?
Enjoy, but beware. Activist actor Daniel Wu plays the mythological Monkey King.
You know, when I watched 16 Candles and saw Long Dong Dong on screen and go, oh my God. You know, to where we are now and seeing what an accurate representation of our culture and our family life it is happening on screen. But I was telling my daughter, like this morning, actually, that this is not normal. This doesn't always happen, so don't think that it is.
This cast does not.
We can't explain how we got here, but...
Yeah. And a lot of this.
A lot of hands wringing, sure. But also a lot of hands clapping for this bellwether of a new time. Richard Louie, Los Angeles.
All right, our thanks to Richard Louie for that story.
That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
The news continues right now. Good morning. I'm Valerie Castro in for Savannah Sellers.
And I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, unprecedented attack. Far from the front lines, a drone attack overnight on residential buildings in Moscow, forcing people there to evacuate. This attack comes after a new wave of powerful explosions hit Kyiv again. We're on the ground with the latest from the Ukrainian capital. Debt deadline. With the clock ticking, leaders in both parties are trying to sell the debt ceiling deal. All the while, the nation's financial fate hangs in the balance. But with just days left before a default and potential economic catastrophe, time is running out. We'll take a look at the sticking points as a key group of lawmakers is set to make a first vote to pass the deal. Scare at sea. A Carnival cruise ship battered by a storm with massive swells. Water sent rushing into the ocean liner and leaving hallways flooded. This morning, there are new questions about why the captain chose to sail through the storm. And flipping the script, this morning I've got a one-on-one conversation with one of the hottest names on Broadway who just made history by becoming one of the first openly non-binary performers to be nominated for a Tony. How they're working to shine a spotlight on diversity and blaze a trail for others to follow. This is one of the biggest hits of the Tony season. Some like it hot. Looking forward to bringing you that conversation a little later this hour. We're going to start with breaking news this morning. Drone attacks targeting the city of Moscow.
These attacks are the first time residential buildings in Russia's capital have been hit since the war started. But Ukraine denying any responsibility for the attack. Meanwhile, the city of Kyiv marching on after facing a barrage of back-to-back attacks in broad daylight, including another deadly strike overnight. NBC News foreign correspondent Molly Hunter has the latest from Kyiv.
Joe, Valerie, good morning to both of you. Now, the Kremlin says President Putin has been briefed about those drone attacks in Moscow. But I just want to step out of frame and have my cameraman zoom up to the top floor of this residential apartment building, a high-rise apartment building in Kyiv. And you can see that massive destruction up on the top floor. The sounds that you might hear, they are throwing debris and cleaning up this area, windows literally coming out of windows. Residents we spoke with say they heard a massive explosion around 3 a.m. Unclear, though, whether it was debris from a downed drone or whether this building took a direct hit.
Overnight in Moscow, a rare drone attack. City officials say several buildings sustained minor damage. Some residents were evacuated, but no serious injuries. The Russian Ministry of Defense says 8 aircraft-type unmanned aerial vehicles were involved in the attack and were destroyed. NBC News has not independently verified that information. Earlier this month, Russian officials said at least 2 drones targeted the Kremlin, but there's been no claim of responsibility. It comes just hours after the third wave of Russian aerial attacks on Ukrainian cities in just 24 hours. Explosions lighting up the sky in Kyiv. Ukraine's Air Force says they destroyed nearly 30 drones. But debris from the interceptions causing serious damage on the ground, killing at least 1 person in the capital, injuring more than 10 in the region. A fire breaking out in a Kyiv high-rise building, forcing residents to evacuate. When the drone is flying, it is fear, this woman says. You are happy to be alive and just thinking about what will happen next. The unrelenting middle-of-the-night attacks come after a rare broad daylight assault on Monday. Kids seen screaming, terrified, running through the streets. Just after 1 p.m., air raid sirens sent residents scrambling for cover. Fragments of missiles landing in busy Kyiv streets.
Take a look. Kyiv is coming back to life just hours after that attack. Everyone is back outside. But earlier on Monday, during that rare daytime attack, city officials say 41,000 people sheltered in the subway.
But these are scenes we haven't seen in months. The defiance still here, this young man says. This is certainly not enough to break us.
Now Moscow points the finger directly at Kyiv for those drone attacks inside Moscow. A senior Ukrainian official, though, this morning is saying that we are watching from Kyiv, but the Ukraine had nothing to do with it. I'll send it back to you guys.
Molly, thank you so much.
Let's bring in retired Lieutenant Colonel Danny Davis. He is a senior fellow and military expert at Defense Priorities. Lieutenant Colonel, good morning. Good to have you with us. So we've got drone attacks on Moscow, a daytime missile strike in Kyiv. These are new scenarios that are different from what we've seen so far. What's the significance here? Are we seeing a turning point in this war?
You're seeing an evolution in the war, without question, because the drones were seen as very effective from the very outset. But it took time to ramp up the production of them into acquisition or for whatever methods they can get it. Now that you're starting to see Russia has actually for many months have been trying to ramp up domestic production, and it now appears that they're starting to have production online. And so I suspect that you're going to see more of these come up. And then, of course, Kiev, as some of their leaders said yesterday, they said, why should Moscow be safe while our capital is not? And now you're seeing it being expanded to Moscow. And I expect this will continue, if not expand.
So Ukraine says it was not behind this drone attack on Moscow, but whoever it was, help us understand how significant a development this is.
Well, so far, it's basically a public relations hit because it didn't even attack any military installations. In fact, apparently, the air defense systems of any drones that were moving towards high-value targets were, in fact, knocked down, but they didn't have any coverage for the residential buildings, and those were hit. So I think that Moscow is now going to do what it can to improve its air defense capability. But I expect that Ukraine will do whatever it can to add. And, of course, I don't really think that, that Ukraine had nothing to do with this, because they said that it was going to happen about 12 hours before it did. And that's just how war is.
Is it surprising Moscow wasn't better prepared for that?
It is, actually, because many of their commentators have been talking about this for months, that they expected it. And how could they not? Because if you're attacking your opponent's capital city, you have to expect that it's going to come in the other direction. And I think that now that they've had it exposed, that their air defense has some capacity, but it's not bulletproof.
So as things escalate here, do we think we might see any Russian allies ramp up efforts to help after these latest attacks? We know Russian ally Belarus has stepped really directly into the conflict, promising nuclear weapons to any ally that joins in the war. What's going on here?
Yeah, Lukashenko has a history of making some really odd statements throughout his tenure there, and this is certainly one of them. And no, I don't think anybody's going to be taking that seriously, because you're not going to join an alliance unless you feel threatened and you feel like there's security in numbers. And nobody outside of Russia and Belarus are threatened at all. And in fact, you had the president of Kazakhstan say, "Oh, yeah, Lukashenko, that was a funny joke." So he's made pretty clear that he's interested in economic union, but he wants nothing to do with any conflict.
All right, Lieutenant Colonel Danny Davis, thanks for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
In Washington today, lawmakers will take the first step towards approving the deal to end the debt ceiling standoff. But with opposition from both sides, its future is far from certain. And President Biden and House Speaker McCarthy are racing to shore up votes to get it passed before the June 5th default deadline. NBC News senior congressional correspondent Garrett Haake joins us now from Capitol Hill.
Hey, Valerie, good morning. Look, there's a new deadline, June 5th, just 6 days away. That means the pressure's on for leaders in both parties to whip their votes and make sure this bipartisan deal can get across the finish line by that deadline, or risk an economic collapse potentially just a few days away.
With 6 days until the U.S. runs out of money to pay its bills, President Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy are racing to shore up support for their bipartisan budget deal that would suspend the nation's borrowing limit through early 2025 while cutting federal spending.
But I feel very good about it.
With the House back in session today, the president appears optimistic the bill will reach his desk by next Monday's deadline, averting a disastrous default.
There is no reason why it shouldn't get done by the 5th.
But some House Democrats say they have concerns about the 99-page bill, including new work requirements for some recipients of the SNAP food assistance program.
We are being held hostage. That is a very real word for where we are right now. There are things I would never vote for under normal circumstances.
I'm saying I'm still undecided because we are still reviewing the bill.
The president asked what he would say to those skeptical Democrats.
Talk to me.
Mr. Biden and senior White House staffers working the phones to sell the deal to fellow Democrats. Meanwhile, some conservative Republicans argue that the bill's spending cuts aren't deep enough.
We're just barreling towards an infinite amount of debt, and we've got to stop that.
Echoed by GOP presidential candidate Ron DeSantis.
Our country was careening towards bankruptcy. And after this deal, our country will still be careening towards bankruptcy.
But House Republican leaders disagree, calling the bill an important step forward.
It's time for the big boys and the big girls to step up and realize that we can't let perfect be the enemy of the good, and that we've got to get this done.
Here's how this is going to play out. We will see a first procedural vote in the Rules Committee today. Then the full House will take this bill up tomorrow night. Expect to see a lot of behind-the-scenes arm twisting and horse trading to try to get the votes necessary just to pass the House. Then, of course, the Senate has to take up this bill, and I expect them to work on it all the way through the weekend, Valerie, putting us right up against that Monday deadline.
Lots more to come, Garrett. Thanks so much.
The Memorial Day holiday turned violent in Florida when a mass shooting in Hollywood Beach left 9 people injured. It was part of a spike in gun violence across the country during the Memorial Day holiday weekend. NBC News correspondent Guad Venegas joins us now with the latest. Guad, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. It was supposed to be a weekend of holiday celebrations across the country for many, but of course it ended in tragedy with a string of gun violence taking place. Here in South Florida, police say there was an altercation just behind me in this area in Hollywood Beach that resulted in gunfire exchange, leaving the victims behind to pick up the pieces.
Overnight gun violence shattering Memorial Day holiday in Hollywood Beach, Florida. 9 people injured, including a 1-year-old child. This video appears to show the moments after the shooting. Beachgoers seen running to take cover from gunfire.
We keep getting calls. It's like an active scene, apparently. I don't know if it's an active shooter, but I hear the calls coming in.
The chaotic aftermath also captured in this video, appearing to show first responders frantically helping victims, with all 9 victims hospitalized, 5 adults and 4 minors.
We have 4 juveniles. Their ages are between 1 and 17.
Police say an altercation between 2 groups led to the violence. Authorities now asking for the public's help with their investigation.
If there is anybody who has pictures, who has videos of this incident, if they could please send it to PD.
The mayor condemning the violence.
I'm saddened and angered that we've had an incident on Hollywood Beach today. People come to a holiday, enjoy a holiday weekend on the beach. To have an altercation with guns in a public setting with thousands of people around them is beyond reckless.
It was part of a deadly weekend of shootings across the country, leaving at least 16 people dead and dozens more injured. A reminder of the deadly toll of gun violence in America.
Now, authorities say thousands were present when this took place. As you saw, they are asking for the public for help, any videos or photos that can help with that investigation. They have detained 1 person of interest, and as of last night, they were still searching for 1 suspect. Joe?
All right, Guad, thank you.
Now to Iowa, where a 9th person was rescued from that partially collapsed apartment building in Davenport.
Take a look at this. 52-year-old Lisa Brooks. She was seen waving out of her window 24 hours after being trapped by debris. She was pulled to safety by first responders. Now city officials want to move forward with demolishing the rest of the building, saying it's not structurally sound and could collapse even more. NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa joins us from Davenport with more on the amazing rescue. Maggie, good morning.
Hey, guys, it was absolutely incredible. And by the way, Lisa Brooks's family was here on the ground last night when she started waving out her window. They were in the crowd cheering with everyone else, and they told us they had come here to, in their words, stop the bulldozers, knowing that at least as of yesterday, the city of Davenport was planning to begin demolition on what's left of this building as soon as this morning. And Brooks, the family noted, was one of many who over the last few years has raised a lot of concerns about the condition of this building, prompting the owner to recently take out permits and start repairs. And basically now people who were angry that process, they say, didn't happen fast enough, believe the city is moving too quickly to tear down what's left. In Davenport, Iowa, amid jaw-dropping wreckage, an incredible display of survival and hope. 52-year-old Lisa Brooks waving out her own window, later telling her family, who says Brooks is disabled, she'd been hiding under her couch in shock for 24 hours after a large chunk of her historic 6-story apartment building collapsed Sunday. Brooks, Monday night, carried out by first responders. What happened when everybody saw her?
They started screaming, they were running around.
Her nephew in total disbelief.
It's like a fight or flight motion, so she took flight and went under there and hid.
But quickly, awe
Find our people! Find our people!
turned to anger, with people arguing more survivors could still be trapped and demanding the city postpone plans to demolish the building as soon as this morning. Officials saying Monday search crews with canines had thoroughly combed the site, adding,
"The building is structurally unsound. It's posing a risk to responders."
Overnight, Davenport's mayor telling NBC News demolition plans are now under evaluation.
The frickin' building just collapsed.
At least 9 people have now been pulled from the rubble. Lexis Berry says her wife, Quanisha, was among them.
The ground just caved in, and then above us caved in on top of us.
For days, the couple had noticed cracks in their unit, snapping this photo just minutes before the collapse. Quanisha was trapped under debris for 8 hours with her legs pinned down. She's currently recovering in the ICU.
Her injuries are going to be life-changing for her.
And of course, we should note the official cause of this collapse is still under investigation. In the meantime, we've heard from city officials, including in a press release overnight, that they believe basically, of course, this building is unstable and they worry the rest of it could come down at any moment. So they're asking people, including protesters who have already started gathering about a block away here at City Hall, to basically keep a safe distance. And we should also note NBC News has reached out to the owner of this building multiple times. So far, no response. So a lot of frustration here on the ground, guys, but also renewed hope in light of that incredible rescue last night. Joe?
Yeah, no kidding. All right, Maggie, thank you so much. The man accused of carrying out the worst anti-Semitic attack in U.S. history goes on trial later today. Robert Bowers is accused of opening fire on a group of worshipers at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh back in 2018. Bowers faces 63 charges, including some hate crime charges. 11 people were killed, 6 others were hurt, including 4 police officers who responded to stop the attack.
Now let's bring back meteorologist Michelle Grossman for a check at your morning News Now weather.
Hey, Michelle, good morning.
Hey there, guys. Great to see you. And we're tracking some showers today, some scattered showers across the country. We have several fronts that will be moving across the country. That's going to bring opportunities for showers, even some storms. The Northeast, another gorgeous day. We had a beautiful day yesterday. We'll see that once again today. Parts of New England into the Great Lakes looking really good as well. We have a front that will be taking hold over Florida. That's going to bring some heavy rain by Wednesday into Thursday. The big story in terms of rainfall today will be in the middle of the country. We are watching a long cold front that's sort of parked over the area. You can see some rain falling in portions of the Midwest right now. Where you see the yellow, that's where the heavier rain is falling. And we do have the chance for seeing some pretty heavy rainfall in spots. It will be isolated, but still could see 3, even 4 inches of rain in some spots. That's going to lead to the chance for some flooding. So this is what it looks like for today, starting out in the west. Some storms in the Great Basin. You see some west storms where you see the green. The southwest looking good. Los Angeles looking really nice today. Hot in Phoenix, temperatures near 100 degrees. It's the middle of the country where we're watching the chance for scattered showers, stretching all the way from the northern plains into the central and southern plains. And the southern plains, we could see some strong storms. I'll show you that in just a minute. And then we have that coastal low. We've been talking about it since last week. It is finally moving away, but the last hurrah this morning being some scattered showers in portions of the southern mid-Atlantic into the Carolinas. That will finally pull off, and then we're going to see some storms tomorrow into portions of the southeast. Another winter, though, in the northeast. A really beautiful day with temperatures in the mid-70s in the northeast, and New England could see temperatures in the 60s. We're going to start to warm it up there, though, as we head towards the later part of the week. This is what Wednesday looks like. This is tomorrow, PM storms in the Intermountain West. We're looking at storms still in the middle of the country, severe storms. So notice that cold front doesn't go very far. So we're looking at the same spot, seeing showers once again tomorrow. Warm still in the Midwest. Temperatures soaring 20, 25 degrees above what is average for this time of year. That warmth is going to swing to the east. So we're going to be into the 90s in New York City by later on this week. This is what it looks like on Friday. Speaking of that warmth in the east, record highs possibly in portions of the Northeast. Otherwise, it's a wet day for many on Friday. From the Rockies into the Intermountain West, portions of the central and southern plains, the upper Midwest, and heavy rain falling in parts of Florida, Miami. You could see lots of rain over Wednesday, Thursday. We're looking at heavy rainfall up to 5 inches in some spots. Let's talk about that summer preview, though, because we're going to bring out the shorts and also the short sleeves in many spots. We're looking at temperatures near 90 degrees in Minneapolis. That is 14 degrees above what is typical for this time of year. Near 90 in Chicago. That's 15 degrees above average as well. In St. Louis, 90 degrees today. And notice what happens tomorrow. It kind of just swings a little bit to the east. So we're really warm in Grand Rapids, 88 degrees. Pittsburgh, you're warm too. Near 90 degrees in Syracuse. That's 14 degrees above average. And then look at New York City, 91 on Friday. It's not going to last long, but we're warm Thursday. We're even warmer on Friday, and then back to the 70s as a front comes through later Friday into Saturday. And speaking of fronts, we're watching those strong storms from New Mexico to Minnesota today. We could see isolated flash flooding. We could see some flooding as well. We could see winds gusting up to 80 miles per hour. That's hurricane force winds. And also the chance for some hail. Tornado risk, it's low, but it's not zero. And guys, we're going to keep this in place for Wednesday as well, so that front kind of lingers over the next couple of days. Back to you.
All right, Michelle, we'll get that sunscreen ready for later this week.
Yes.
Speaking of heat, this morning, Miami is celebrating after their beloved Heat clinched a spot in the NBA Finals. They beat the Boston Celtics in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals last night.
Now it's on to the finals where the Heat will take on my hometown team, the Denver Nuggets. And for both teams, this will be a very special championship. NBC News correspondent Ann Thompson joins us now from what has to be a heartbroken city of Boston. Ann, good morning.
Oh, good morning. This is my hometown team, the Boston Celtics, and I can tell you this city was primed to make history last night to see the Celtics become the first team that was down 3-0 and come back and win a series in the NBA. It had never happened before, and you know what? It didn't happen last night either. Instead, this morning, it is the Miami Heat making history as the second 8th seed to go all the way to the NBA Finals.
In a crazy series which saw both the Miami Heat and Boston Celtics on the ropes, it was the Heat who came up big in last night's deciding Game 7, blocking a historic comeback from the Celtics in their own house. Boston attempting to become the first team in NBA history to win a 7-game series after losing the first 3 games. The Heat bouncing back from a devastating Game 6 loss after an incredible Celtics buzzer beater Saturday. The 8th-seeded Heat finally overcoming their underdog status, led by star Jimmy Butler. Butler scoring 28 points to send the Heat to the NBA Finals, named the Eastern Conference Finals MVP.
My teammates give me so much confidence and belief to go out there and just hoop at a high level.
As a deflated TD Garden cleared out, in Miami, fans were going crazy. The Heat now looking to win their 4th championship trophy. Standing in their way now, a hungry and talented Denver Nuggets squad, eager to win that franchise's first ever title. Game 1 of the finals will be 10 days after Denver stunned LeBron and the Los Angeles Lakers in a Western Conference sweep. Denver's coach says his team is ready to return to the court.
I give our guys credit. They have been locked in. The energy has been very good.
Now, this morning, it is the Celtics' turn to take a look and try to figure out what went wrong and how to fix it, while Miami goes on to play for yet another championship ring. But I can tell you here in Boston, there are a lot of long faces this morning.
Oh, that's heartbreaking, but go Denver Nuggets.
But I was about to say, I think we have someone who doesn't care sitting here because they have another team on their mind.
And thanks so much.
Later today, the man accused of ramming a U-Haul truck into a barrier near the White House last week will appear before a judge in court. Prosecutors say the suspect, Cy Kandula, wanted to end U.S. democracy and take over the government. Kandula reportedly told officers on the scene he was on a mission to kill President Biden and that he admired Nazis. NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delaney joins us now from Washington with more. Ken, I know you've done extensive reporting on what prosecutors are going to say about the U-Haul driver's intentions. What can you tell us about how the suspect apparently wanted to give a speech after taking power?
Yeah, that's right, Joe. But I first should tell you, and good morning, by the way, that a document popped up in the docket this morning. The suspect's lawyer is asking for a continuance of this hearing, saying she has not had enough time to prepare. So the detention hearing may well not happen today. But in preparation for it, prosecutors filed a memo in which they said they seized a diary, a so-called green book, from among Kandula's possessions in that U-Haul truck. And included in that green book was a draft speech that he intended to give once he seized power in the White House, and he was announcing an end to U.S. democracy and the death penalty for any resistors. Remember that we've already reported that he said he intended to kill the president if need be and seize power. He also told Secret Service agents that even though he didn't make it into the White House, he felt he was successful because he sent a message to the Secret Service and other organizations. Remember, he had a Nazi flag, expressed admiration for Hitler. So not a well person, obviously. Prosecutors asking to keep him behind bars pending trial.
Yeah, so Ken, if the hearing happens today or when it does happen down the road, what exactly can we expect? What will prosecutors argue to try and keep the suspect in jail until a possible trial?
They're arguing that the big ones, that he's a danger to the community and a flight risk. Well, you know, he flew here from St. Louis. That's where he lives. So they're saying he has no ties to the Washington, D.C. community. There's no place they can release him to be sure that he would appear. But they're also saying because of his dangerous rhetoric and his violent actions that he poses a continuing danger to the community. And so they are asking a judge to hold him in jail. Remember, he's charged with 1 count of depredation of property, destroying federal property. He's not charged with trying to kill the president as of now.
So, Ken, what is it we are learning about the suspect in the days after this attack, and what has been his defense so far?
Well, he really hasn't had a chance to mount a defense. His lawyer, his public defender, is just now getting up to speed on the case. We don't know very much about him other than that the government said that he is a lawful permanent resident, so subject to deportation if he's convicted of this charge. And the government mentioned that he had visited family in India. And that's about it, really. But clearly from the rhetoric that he's espousing, again, not a well person, Joe.
All right, Ken Delanian, thank you so much.
International headlines now starting with violent clashes between Serb protesters and NATO forces in northern Kosovo.
NBC's Claudio Lavanga joins us from Rome with that and other international headlines. Claudio, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Yes, on Monday, 25 troops from a NATO-led peacekeeping force were injured after clashes with protesters in Kosovo. Now, the troops were trying to stop a crowd of ethnic Serbs from entering a government building in which Albanian mayors took up their post this week. The soldiers tried to disperse the protesters with tear gas and stun grenades, while demonstrators responded by throwing rocks at them. Tension among ethnic Albanians and Serbs living in Kosovo has been high ever since the country declared independence from Serbia, but has recently worsened. Let's go to Nova Scotia, where raging wildfires have forced at least 16,000 people to evacuate their homes. Officials in the Canadian region say the fires have now spread to 25,000 acres and have been deemed out of control. Nova Scotia is experiencing a record-breaking heat wave, and wind gusts of up to 40 miles per hour are causing the fires to spread quickly. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called the wildfires incredibly serious. And here's the proof that if a sport is cheesy, it doesn't mean it's not dangerous. Hundreds of people in Gloucester, England, as they do every year for some reason, roll down a steep hill to chase a 7-pound cheese wheel. The winner of the women's race was knocked unconscious after she bumped her head, but still managed to roll through the finishing line and won. She said she realized she won only after she woke up in the medical tent. Sorry, this is so funny. I now wonder what. I'm so sorry. This is really funny. But I wonder whether the photographer who took the picture of the winners asked her to say cheese, guys.
I hope he did.
We can laugh because we think she's okay, although we don't know.
She won, though, right?
She did win. And that's nothing. You should see what they do for the bottle of wine that goes with that cheese. Wow.
Claudio, thank you so much. We're back now with the latest on the 2024 presidential campaign. Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis is set to have his first official campaign event in Des Moines, Iowa later today.
Comes just days after DeSantis kicked off his campaign on Twitter with Elon Musk.
NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns joins us now from Des Moines with the details. Dasha, good morning. Let's start with what we can expect to see from today's event. They're calling it a campaign kickoff instead of a traditional launch. Is there a difference?
Hey guys, good morning. Well, look, the official launch happened on the internet. You saw it on Twitter Spaces, or you heard it at least, with Elon Musk. So that was the official launch of the campaign. Now, this is when the game really begins. This is, I think, the third time I'm talking to you guys from Des Moines, Iowa, about a DeSantis event, but this is the first time that he is an actual presidential candidate. So now the pressure is on. Now he has to prove himself in the very important retail politics that is so critical to voters here in Iowa and in the other states he'll be visiting next week, New Hampshire and South Carolina. These are the early states that can make or break a presidential candidacy. Of course, they are not kingmakers, but they can really build that momentum and show voters whether or not somebody really has legs in these races. And so this is going to be an important moment for him on the ground as a presidential candidate, looking voters in the eyes and making his case now as a candidate, guys.
So, Dasha, this comes after the glitchy Twitter announcement alongside Elon Musk. Any indication that hurt DeSantis at all?
Well, look, you saw both President Biden and former President Trump sort of memifying that moment and using it to their own advantage. The DeSantis team, though, saying that they broke the internet and using that to sort of propel their message that he has a lot of enthusiasm behind him. So a bit of a Rorschach test. If you're a fan of DeSantis, he broke the internet. If you're not, it was a failure. But meanwhile, the campaign itself is moving forward with the message that he is the alternative to the former president, that he is the guy who can beat Joe Biden. You heard him talking about that just over the last few days, and that he can serve 2 terms, which is something that the former president cannot do. And I think that's something that you're going to hear a lot on the campaign trail as part of the case that he's making for why he is the guy to elect.
DeSantis is speaking out about why he is choosing to run for president in 2024. He had this to say on Fox News.
Why is right now the time for Ron DeSantis to run for president?
Because everyone knows if I'm the nominee, I will beat Biden and I will serve 2 terms, and I will be able to destroy leftism in this country and leave woke ideology on the dustbin of history.
Recent polling shows DeSantis is still trailing former President Trump by a considerable amount. So, Dasha, how does he plan to differentiate himself during this early campaign tour? And can we expect to see him touting his recent legislation that was passed in Florida?
Yeah, well, look, I think what you just heard from him there is going to be a big part of the case he's making here in Iowa and beyond. But yeah, his policies in Florida, the massive amount of legislation that he just passed, that is going to be critical. He's going to make the case that he is not just talk, but action. He does have policy platforms to stand on, so he will be absolutely touting those. That was a big part of his strategy to announce after legislative session was over, so that he would be able to point to some of those victories in Florida and say, hey, look at what we got done. And that's what I'll be able to do nationwide as well. The thing that I'm going to be watching for, though, is how does he walk that line when it comes to former President Trump? He's got to find his footing really quickly here. How directly is he going to go after him? Or is he going to do that sort of subtle, jab without actually naming him? What is going to be his tack when it comes to going after the former president? That's going to be really critical, as a lot of people have a whole lot of opinions on how he should handle that, and excuse the early morning to morning traffic here. But look, that's going to be important, and that is going to be a big part of creating the sort of permission structure for voters who are maybe looking for an alternative to former President Trump but aren't ready to jump just yet. They need to see evidence that whatever alternative they pick actually has a path forward. They need to prove that to those voters now so that they can jump and, by the way, look to their friends and say, oh, hey, the water's fine. Come on in. We can do this, and we can go hitch our bandwagon to another candidate here.
All right, Dasha Burns in Iowa, thank you so much. We're back with a story that may make you a little seasick. That's because a Carnival cruise ship was hit by a major storm. Passengers were forced to take higher ground after the hallways became flooded with water. Other parts of the ship were also left damaged. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock joins us now from Miami with more on this scary situation. Sam, good morning.
Yeah, Valerie, good morning. There were more than 3,000 passengers on board the ship as they were experiencing this ordeal. And Valerie, the National Hurricane Center had been keeping tabs on the storm, which was sitting off the coast of the East Coast here for about a week with 12 to 17-foot swells. That is what this ship ran into off of South Carolina's coast on Friday. Those rough seas really flooding hallways and staterooms as many passengers were concerned about the level of communication.
For some 3,000 passengers cruising on the Carnival Sunshine this past week, a coastal storm turned their Caribbean dreams into a very scary nightmare.
I just prayed over and over and over for those waters to calm down.
After 5 days of nearly perfect weather, the 100,000-ton ship was slammed by wind gusts up to 80 miles an hour as it approached South Carolina's coast. Swells of nearly 20 feet tilting the ship, flooding corridors, unhinging doors, and terrifying passengers.
I recently went through cancer treatment, and this trip was about 3 times scarier than that.
Sharon Tutrone, a college professor, was celebrating with her 73-year-old mom, her caregiver during those cancer treatments. Both women couldn't believe what they were witnessing.
The ship took a hit from a massive wave. It scared the heck out of me. It sounded like the ship split in two.
To make matters worse, frustrated passengers say the only communication coming from the captain Friday was just as the storm started.
We are expecting adverse weather condition as we sail back to Charleston and maybe arrive later than scheduled. We will continue to monitor the situation and provide you with an update early tomorrow morning.
The captain also telling passengers to be cautious when walking around the ship and that the vessel might move a little more than usual. Over 12 hours, the ship was pounded by fierce winds and rough seas. Several passengers we spoke with said they didn't receive any further information from the captain or crew until well into the next morning. And a screen displaying wind speeds and their velocity was replaced with a standby slate.
There was a crew door there, and they said they have seen the crew in there wearing life jackets. And at that point, I'm like, okay, they're wearing life jackets, but they're not telling us to do anything.
Daniel Taylor's cabin was on deck 2 in the front of the ship.
It sounded like a wrecking ball was hitting the ship, and it honestly sounded like it was tearing the ship apart.
Carnival later releasing a statement writing in part, Carnival Sunshine's return to Charleston was impacted by the weather and rough seas on Saturday. The weather's prolonged impact on the Charleston area delayed the ship's arrival. We appreciate the patience and understanding of all of our guests. The unsettling sequence, leaving thousands of passengers shaken, but thankfully there were no reports of any injuries.
I don't wish this on my worst enemy. It was awful.
So the ship came back about 12 hours late on Saturday. By the next morning, the Sunshine was back out on a different voyage at sea. So far, Carnival has not said why they didn't wait or sort of try to reorient around the storm, but rather appears to have approached it directly. Valerie, back to you.
All right, Sam Brock, thanks so much.
Now to some financial headlines. Disgraced Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes is expected to begin serving an 11-year prison term today.
CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us now with that and other news. Good morning, Silvana.
Good morning, Valerie. Good morning, Joe. Yep, the day has arrived for Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes to report to federal prison in Texas. She will begin serving an 11-year sentence for defrauding investors. And this closes a chapter in the downfall of one of Silicon Valley's most high-profile entrepreneurs after it was revealed that the company's blood testing technology was unreliable. Holmes leaves behind 2 children who were born during the hoopla surrounding her trial and conviction on 4 counts of fraud and conspiracy. Tesla CEO Elon Musk has reportedly touched down in China, and it's his first visit to the country in 3 years. Reuters says Musk's private jet landed earlier today in Beijing. Musk is expected to visit with top Chinese government officials and Tesla's factory in Shanghai. China is the company's second largest market after the United States. A group of top researchers, engineers, and CEOs are issuing a new warning about the threat they believe artificial intelligence poses to humanity. In a brief 22-word statement, the group says mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war. The statement is co-signed by people including the CEO of OpenAI, that's the company behind the popular app ChatGPT. Earlier this year, an open letter was signed by many of the same individuals calling for a 6-month pause in AI development, guys. I could have told you that.
Yeah, the warnings keep coming. All
I'm
right.
scared.
Silvana, thank you so much.
Sure thing.
Let's head to Venice, a popular summertime vacation destination. But it seems the famous Grand Canal there is taking on a new color. It's turning green. Gondolas and water taxis have been rowing with a new view since the weekend, sending authorities on the move to solve the mystery. NBC News Chief International Correspondent Keir Simmons got the tough assignment this morning. Joins us now from Venice on a boat. Keir, good morning.
Yeah, the assignment of the year, right, Joe? You're right, this water was green. It's not green any longer. You can see from the shot on the bridge above there, the water is now the color that it should be. That's the Rialto Bridge from the 12th century. But now an investigation, a forensic investigation is underway. They're searching CCTV in what you could compare with the setting and the mystery, like something from an Agatha Christie whodunit.
The fluorescent green appeared suddenly on Sunday in Venice's world-renowned Grand Canal. Soon, images began appearing on social media, filmed by tourists here to enjoy the picture postcard views of a city famed for its beauty, stunned by the unexplained, brightly colored stain in the water. We arrived early this morning.
Yes, it's green all in this area.
Our water taxi captain, Niccolo, had seen the strange green wash.
You like Hulk, the Avengers, the super
It was the
hero.
colour of
It's
the Incredible Hulk.
color. Yes, yes.
Have you ever seen the water in Venice, that colour?
Never, never.
Now there's a police investigation and wild speculation.
We just came under the Rialto Bridge. This is where that green stain was. It's disappeared. Its appearance in the water, still a mystery.
Officials say the green colour was caused by a harmless chemical, fluorescein.
It seemed like there was so much of it. Does that suggest someone did it deliberately?
The investigations are looking everywhere. The head of Venice's prefecture told us all hypotheses are open. In 1968, an artist with an environmental message threw green dye into the canal. And this month, climate activists turned Rome's Trevi Fountain black. In Milan, they threw paint at a statue. And in 2022, oil activists threw soup at a Van Gogh masterpiece.
For me, is the activist.
Jonathan and Whitney from Seattle are in Venice for their 10th wedding anniversary.
Well, in Chicago, they pour green in the river purposely to celebrate St. Patrick's Day.
But it's not St. Patrick's Day?
It's not, no.
For years, Venice has been assaulted by floods, while during COVID, it was a ghost town. The water so clean, jellyfish appeared. But nothing like this has been seen for decades. And so far, there's no explanation.
And Joe, the chemical that was used, they've now confirmed, is a chemical that can be used to look for holes in pipes. It seems like more was used in this case than you would use for that. So, again, it just adds to the mystery. But if we just show you that wide shot again from the bridge of this picturesque scene, I can confidently report, Joe, that life is as good as ever here in Venice.
Looks rough. And Kier, no word yet if the Chicago River has an alibi. We're checking with our sources on that one. All right, Kier, thank you so much. Enjoy your time there in Venice.
Welcome back. Is this real life or is this just fantasy? Following in the recent trend of rock stars selling their music catalog for big bucks, the entire catalog for the band Queen could soon be up for sale. And some estimates say it could go for more than $1 billion. The reason for that high price point? Well, the 2018 Oscar-winning film Bohemian Rhapsody about late frontman Freddie Mercury has renewed interest in the band. That or Bohemian Rhapsody is just about the best karaoke song ever, although that's debatable. The last music catalog to go for big bucks was Bruce Springsteen's for $500 million. Joe, I don't know about you, but I always think of Wayne's World when I hear that song.
Yeah, no kidding. We were literally listening to Bohemian Rhapsody over the holiday weekend, so I guess that proves the point right there.
Great song.
Thanks, Valerie. Now to our series, Flipping the Script, featuring people on screen, on stage, and behind the scenes, shining a spotlight on diversity. Enter J. Harrison G., now a Tony-nominated performer, breaking barriers and gender stereotypes on Broadway. Such a good show. G plays the role of Jerry/Daphne in the musical Some Like It Hot. The role earned them a Tony nomination for Best Actor in a Musical, making them one of the first non-binary actors to be nominated for a Tony. The show scored 13 nominations, more than any other this year. We are lucky to have J. Harrison G. on set with us. Good morning. Congratulations on all the Tony nominations, including yours.
Thank you.
This is, I mean, a movie that folks remember from 1959. It's fair to say it's been updated a little bit for I guess, more modern times. Yeah. Talk to us about your character and how much you love playing this character.
I play Jerry Daphne, and it's a fun journey I get to take every night, 8 times a week. A journey of freedom, of expansion, of growth, of newness, and it's something I'm excited to share with audiences, to be a mirror of how to break ourselves of limits, of labels, of boundaries, and allowing life to really expand us.
You and Alex Newell made history this year, the first non-binary performers nominated for Tonys. What did that mean to you, that making history that way?
It means everything. It's not something I take lightly. Of the work is being honored, the humanity is being honored, and we're making moves and strides to shape society and our industry in a different way.
That has sparked discussion about gendered awards in the Tonys. You had to make a decision into what category to enter. There was another performer who's non-binary who decided, I'm not going to enter because I don't want to have to pick.
Yeah.
How did you make that decision, and do you think things do need to change when it comes to how we give awards out to folks?
There's always room for growth. And what helped make it easy for me is I'm always going to show up in my fullness no matter where I am. And somebody else's compartmentalization of me doesn't bound me to being what they want me to be. So it was easy for me to say that I am going to show up in my fullness and be who I am no matter what, regardless of where you put me. So it was quite easy for me.
Because you show up in your fullness, I think after every show, every night, or maybe during the day, you have a lot of fans who gather outside the stage door. Many of them are there for you. What do you hear from people who love the show and love you?
I hear so many things, and I hear so many queer people who say thank you for the representation, thank you for allowing them to be seen, for their humanity, for parts of their journey and their experience to be experienced on stage, and for audiences to really receive a bit of life in a clear way and in a fresh way.
What does it mean to you when you hear people say that?
It means everything. I try to do everything in life with intention, with purpose, but most importantly with love. And so the way that people are receiving our show and really receiving the journey that I take every night, Jerry, Daphne, queer people, cisgender people, so such a range of people really responding in such a beautiful way.
Do you hear from people who maybe go into the show not knowing what to expect, and it changes something or makes them see things in a new way?
Oh, absolutely. Those people who are so in love with the original movie, those baby boomers who come and see the show and are like, wow, this fluid journey you take, and how their eyes are open, they're expanded, they really don't expect it. And that's how I know my job has been done effectively. If I can make one person leave the theater and think a little differently than when they came in, my job is done.
I understand you grew up singing in the church choir. Yeah. Your dad was a pastor.
Yeah.
How did that shape you?
Oh, that's my foundation. My foundation is faith, always. And it's not something that I take lightly. It is something I carry with me. I'm walking in my ministry. It just looks a little differently than what I was told it was supposed to look like.
How does your father feel about everything?
He is learning how much purpose my life has and is seeing how effective I'm being in the world using the gifts God gave me. So it's a journey for both of us.
We have a little less than a minute left here, but the Tonys are, what, 12 days away? Not that anyone's counting. Are you nervous? Are you anxious? Are you excited? How are you feeling?
I'm all of the things, but mostly grounded and excited. It's a wonderful experience, and my mother's going to be my date for the Tonys. And she's nervous to see the show. Things I do still surprise her. She's like, when did you learn how to do all of this? So I'm excited to just show her what I've learned, how I'm continuing to grow and expand.
Well, we are excited for you. Congratulations. It is a well-deserved nomination.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate everything you are doing. Jay Harrison G., thank you so much for being here. Of course, the show running on Broadway now. You must check it out. It is fantastic. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.